Very quickly, I wanted to cover the step 5 from last time that I just sort of threw up on the screen. I washed with regular detergent and in the dryer on normal to dry the pieces all the way. And then I always press with a lot of steam from behind. I don't want to fold over too much of my front design, and so I don't press from the front. I do try to carefully press the fabric on the face out to the edges so that I have as much to work with as I need when I'm doing the final sewing together of the pieces. And so here I am pressing the tea cozy and making sure to very carefully press out my fabric all the way on the edges, even though I don't go over the applique itself very much and try to stay off of it for the most part. These pieces are untrimmed. You can kind of see that there's quite a bit of rattiness here, and so I spend some time with scissors and a lint roller and clean all of that up. Trimming your work can be pretty easy on the little pieces, but with these more complex works it can be actually fairly time consuming. I usually watch television when I do it. And I wanted to get up nice and close and show you a couple of things. It's really a matter of personal preference. I've even seen raw edge work where people don't trim it at all and where they stitch a lot further away than I do. For me personally, any of these little guys that are still hooked on both sides that I see are going to be coming off, I tend to want to get those off. But that's just my preference. And some fabrics, such as this gold one that I'm trimming right now, get pretty fuzzy with stuff, and I like to clean them up quite a bit. And so I just spend a little time. I'm in a very sunny location on a kind of a cold winter day. See, like this right here. I don't want that on there. When you trim this stuff, if your lint roller is right nearby, there is this tendency for the stuff you trim off to jump onto your lint roller. But anyway, this is all it is. As much or as little as you need to do to like your work. There's no denying it. I don't like the way that this tea cozy fits this tallest pot. It complicates everything. At this point, the instructions are going to diverge a bit. I'm going to show you what I actually do to finish my daughter's tea cozy, and in yellow I'm going to tell you the easier version to do if your pin fitted cozy fits the pot that you're making it for. After debating with myself, I decide that I'm going to add a black inset down the middle that will make it a little better shape, a little bigger, and allow me to free motion quilt with the aqua and rust thread that I did on the back of the cozy. When my daughter comes home from school, she tells me that she loves it because the kanji that she had me add mean water and fire, which she likes a lot with the aqua and rust quilting. It also adds the contrast with the black that I kind of wish I'd added with the quilting on the front when I did the little stipple. Making this video would have been a lot easier if I just pretended to finish this cozy with a basting stitch and not putting in the inset, but I actually thought it might be beneficial to some folks to see how I actually work when I'm figuring out a design. When this is finished, I like this cozy so much better with the black piece. It does complicate things. It adds 2 additional seams as well as additional materials, but if I were actually going to sell tea cozies, I would probably come up with a more complex design than just the standard 2-sided half moon. Right now I'm making a leaf very similar to the leaf that I've made in the past, except for this one I consider to be a stuffed leaf, just like the stuffed flower petals that I like to make where I like to have batting partially inside the leaf, enough to give it a little bit of body and form, but not enough bulk that you have a hard time sewing through it and attaching it to things and using it for the purposes that you want. And that is why I put the batting all the way along the leaf so that it stiffens the seam lines, but then I trim it out of there so that you can bunch the leaf up and gather it the way you want and make it look attractive. On the chili peppers and also the apple mitts that we made leaves before, I didn't want to add any extra bulk to those leaves, and that's why they're not stuffed the way that this one is. It just gets sewn into the seam of this inset. These layers can slip around quite a bit when you're quilting, and so they become a little misshapen and mashed near the ends. That's why I'm trimming off a little bit more than 1/8 of an inch, just to get a nice crisp edge that's easy to pin. Adding this inset is a little bit more difficult than a straight seam. You just need to ease the fit similar to the way that you ease the cap of a sleeve. It's a pretty easy thing to do. You just want to work those layers and sort of mash things down right before the needle gets to each area so that you don't have any puckers. Even though I'm doing a 1/2 inch seam allowance, I still want to trim this. I find that things just look better if they're trimmed out. And I did want to note that I used to line everything that I made, and at a certain point I decided that the quilting on the inside of the items was actually a feature, that it was nice to be able to see and feel that. On the other hand, this is not a finished inside, and so I'm not going to bind my seams the way that I would if this were a cosmetic bag or a purse. Whenever you have dangling parts like this leaf, try to remember to pin them out of the way of your seam line so that you can avoid unnecessary picking out and repairs. Again, you can see as I'm pinning the second side that the side of the cozy is dishing subtly so that it actually matches up with the inset right at the 1/2 inch seam line. This is the way that you're able to sew a round edge to a flat edge without puckering. Again, you just want to fit as you go, taking your pins out before you get to them, gently smoothing out any area that seems like it's going to pucker. If you go slowly and have a seam guide of some sort, it's pretty easy to do a seam like this with gentle curve. Again, it's quite possible that your cozy fit the way it was originally and that you don't want to fuss with this whole inset thing. I'm ironing this flat. I think it looks really cute like this. I'm very happy with the way it's turning out at this point. Here's a tip. Never ask a 15-year-old who loves Avatar: The Last Airbender what kind of binding she wants on her tea cozy. I'm going to do the front of this with water and the back of this with flames, which is nice because it does give me a chance to show you how you can do these bindings so that you can use different fabrics and have different shapes. Some can be leaves, some can be flames, some can be water. So to do this, first I practiced my shapes because I've never done fire and water, and I hope this looks nice because it's going to be practiced for something else rather than be something that I've done a bunch of times. And what I'm going to do is I've gently bowed the bottom of my fabric just very quickly with my scissors without really any kind of measuring or anything. And the idea is that this is going to be water, and it's going to go this way. I wonder if I'm going to like that because that's the way I practiced stitching on paper. And then I'm going to have a couple leaves that I'll plant at the very end. And then on the back, it'll have the same type of thing. It'll meet back here, and it'll have a couple of leaves, and I want to make sure that these cover each other at least by 1/4 of an inch or so. If my fabric shifts very much while I'm stitching it, I'm going to go ahead and just sort of pull it tight. I just really want it to take the shape of the cozy. And I'm going to pull pins as I go. My red is loosening up a little, and I'm just going to move it because it doesn't matter. I don't need to ease that. I just need it to cover. I'm going to make sure it's flat in the back, but I'm going to pin it out of my way. I might come up that high with my flames, but I kind of doubt it. I could have used a smaller piece. My work makes scraps. I make smaller and smaller scraps, and I have friends who sew who will take my little bits and pieces, and that's good. Okay, I'm coming up on the area where my seams are. When I'm going through that, I'm going to be extra careful, take my time, stop a bunch if I need to. I'm not going to break a needle or get stressed out or have to pick stuff out. I would have noticed sooner if I weren't filming, but this fabric almost has flames in it, and I could have been following them all along. When you're free motion quilting, especially something you're not used to doing, take a breather. Anytime there's the slightest thing bothering you, stop, check it out. Is your tension wrong? Is something flapped underneath that's getting sewn down in the wrong place? Are you making bad puckers on the other side? Just take a look at what you're doing and breathe. I consider myself a decent seamstress, kind of a guerrilla quilter, and a little bit of an artist. So my red is underneath my blue, and they'll both get a little ratty, and there will be that little hint of red behind that. I don't mind the way that looks. If you did, you would have to be careful to make sure that you didn't allow that to happen. I do it on purpose a lot, because when you get a bunch of layers, you actually get that edge. This is a little hint for the future. You get that edge to kind of felt up when you've got a few layers going there, and it can create some really pretty depth on your pieces. It's possible that after watching me make this tea cozy for my daughter, you have a sense of why I avoid special orders and especially commissions on larger works as much as possible. I think it's the prettiest tea cozy I've ever made. Anyway. Next I'm going to work on the trivet, and it's going to be a much more straightforward process. I'm going to get through it as quickly as I can, because you can reference the other 2 4-pin fusible binding videos, the one for the general instructions or the addendum that adds the instructions for the wavy binding, if you need a little refresher on some of that. I will tell you anything additional that I know of that pertains to it as we go. So I'm just going to cut this, making it a little irregular. I still like to keep my corners essentially 90 degrees. Now, one thing about this trivet, it's so thick with these 3 layers of Insulbrite that you don't need to mess with your walking foot. This is going to work out just fine with a regular foot on your machine, because this is so stiff it's going to control the shape of the piece. I can bind this, if I'm careful, with 1 piece selvage to selvage. Okay, so I've gone ahead and pressed this first like that, and then like that. And I'm going to start about here. And I generally stay away from batiks for this type of binding, for a double fold binding, because there's a little more forgiveness in the way that a regular quilting cotton sews down, in my opinion. Okay, so you can see that this is that angle, and I'm just going to stuff that in there. You don't have to stuff that much in. This though is, I want it to be short of this part, even once it stretches out as you're stitching it, so I cut it a little shorter there. So this goes in here. So here's that, and when I press this like this, and then press this over, and I stitch down through here, it's gonna make this kind of unsewn scarf joint. I like the way these trivets look displayed in a plate rack, and the 3 layers of batting help keep them stiff enough to do that. In my booth I tell people that they can use it as a trivet, throw it through the laundry, put it back in their plate rack when they're not using it. And I don't sell a lot of these, but I think they're a nice item, and they're small and manageable for practicing techniques. You certainly could do it with just 1 layer of batting to practice, and then you could use your piece to make anything you wanted, a little cosmetic bag or some other kind of useful, functional piece that you could use for something. I'm just going to finish up my table mat. I'm not going to show tons of this, but I am going to try to give you a sense of what I'm doing. Right now I'm trimming the back, and I want to make sure that I have the green backing fabric everywhere, and that it's not frayed out or in any way weakened on the back, because the way that I'm going to do this, I'm going to want to make sure that that's all there. And of course I like to clean things as I go. I feel like I have a better sense of what things really look like if I don't allow them to get too cluttered with loose threads and attached threads and other things. So to do this, I'm going to use up part of this hand-dyed fabric, and that's green, and I dyed this fabric myself some time ago, and I don't like to keep fabric in my stash forever, so I'm going to use this. It actually won't use all of it. It's going to use a couple inches, and there will be a circle left over that'll go in my scrap bin. I make it a little bit bigger, and this is a prototype. I've made a lot of the big flowers, and I will probably always have one of those in my booth because it's sort of a signature piece and it looks nice on the front table, but I don't sell one very often anymore. I don't know how many I've sold, probably around a dozen or maybe a few more. I don't know if I'm gonna bead or not. If I get this video done and it's good, I'll probably just post it even if the beading's not done, and in which case I would try to feature it in the thumbnail, and if that didn't look good and seem like a decent thumbnail to me, I might post it on Facebook finished. Again, I'm not going to show you that much of this, but I do want to say there's so much potential for this technique, and I really hope that we get to do some of this, because I'd really like to pass some of this along, because some of these things I'm not sure how long I'm going to keep doing them. And I feel like my work is getting a little stale, and that I need to have a reason to get creative and do something new. So I've pressed this. I did have one piece that moved a lot from where I meant it to be, but luckily I have overlapping, and that's part of why I overlap it a lot. Plus I like the complexity. I've allowed this edge to be irregular because I'm going for an organic shape here, and I think that will look the nicest. I know some tricks on how you could easily get that to be uniform, but that's not what I'm going for here. On this back, I am going to press this down and pin it down, and then I'm going to hand stitch that. You could easily do a line of stitching, but I don't think I would like that very much, and I could count on the stuff I'm going to do on the front to lay this flat, but then I think a lot of odd things could happen, and so I'm just going to take a little breather, and I might have to do a few little relief cuts in this to get it to do what I want in a few of these areas. It's pretty good where you're on the bias and there's a lot of stretch, but where it's straight on the grain, let's see if you can see that. See how this is straight on the grain here? Can you see that? There's not a lot of extra, and so if I take a few little clips, I get myself a little bit more, just like you clip curves when you're sewing a garment or lots of different things that you can sew. And as I'm hand sewing, I'm going to work on anything like this, just with my fingers, to get it nice and flat. Okay, so I'm back, and I've got this thing like this, and you can see that I've hand sewn around the back, trying to minimize any puckers. With this type of thing, a little minimal puckering is alright with me because of what's going on. I didn't follow my own advice. I should have used a regular printed fabric instead of this hand dye, because this is a real tight weave, just like a batik, and it's a little bit crisper and flatter and more tightly woven. The looser weave in this is a little more forgiving going around some of these edges, but I think it's fine, especially since it's just for me. I really sort of bit off more than I realized when I decided to do the 3 project options with this. And I know that I haven't covered everything you would need to know to make this type of a flower. I've intentionally not gone very in-depth with how I'm doing this, because I really do believe that this can be very overwhelming. When I do something for the first time using some of these techniques, I'm even a little overwhelmed, and I've been doing this for a decade. And so I would really like folks, even though it's exciting, the idea of jumping in with a big complicated raw edge project, I would like people to start small and do a little bit of raw edge on something that you can make into something that you'll like, or even bind it and make it into a little wall hanging. But the thing is to start small, don't start with too many layers, get used to this whole idea of working with fabric that's loose, because fusing is the typical way that people do applique, whether it's raw edge or not. And I'm hoping that there are some of you out there that are going to run with this, that are going to have a good time and learn to do this. And so all I'm doing here is showing you at 6 times regular speed, me trying to make this look like some kind of a flower in the end, something that is more along the lines of a moonflower or a morning glory or something of that nature. I think of a pansy a little bit while I'm doing it. I know now, after making this one, a lot of things that I would do slightly differently, but I do think it was a good experiment. It's a nice size. It's something that I could make as a mat for people for their table that would be sort of a high-end item. I can't tell you how long it's been since I've made something for myself or for my daughter and actually put a lot of time and effort into it. And so I'm hoping that tomorrow morning I'll get up and bead this and take a really nice photo of it while I still have good light coming in through the windows, and post this video tomorrow. I'm very excited that I'm only 4 away from 700 subscribers, and that's great, and I hope people are making some of the projects. It's been really fun for me to do this, and now I think it's a good time for me to take a little breather and post a few tips, some things that are sort of falling by the wayside with these bigger projects. And at the very end of the month I'm going to start up the denim tote, and when I do that it will be both versions. It will be the watercolor and the easy stencils, and I look forward to hearing from any of you. Thanks so much for watching. One person let me know that she got Rosemary's book on fabric collage and that she loves it, and that's just awesome. I hope there are more of you that will take a look at her book. It's a great book. That's The Art of Fabric Collage by Rosemary Eichhorn. If you'll allow me to wax a little philosophical for a moment here. On this mat, I stitched through a little bit with my hand stitching, and so I did a little additional satin stitching in those places, and I added quite a bit near the center because I like the centers to look like there's a lot going on, and like there's a lot of hairy plant parts in that area. And then I did some beading in the similar color beads, and all my beading is fairly simple and fast. I go for the big effect with not too much time and investment, and I use a bead spinner, and I'll show that at some point in a quick tip. But and I always use Nymo thread so that things will last and not pull out easily. I try to be careful to knot off regularly. But what I wanted to say is that I've learned to trust that things happen for a reason. Time and time again, the steps I take to work through my own little mistakes that I make when I'm making something out of fabric have put me on my own best path. For me, the mistake is an area of potential creativity. It's the opportunity for something completely new and different. It's the hole that I know leads outside the box.